A little bit about me before I get into this story. I am and have always been a very small girl, standing at 4'11", full grown now at 27 years old. And I have always been able to pass as being much younger than I am, especially if I'm not wearing makeup. When I was a small child of about 7 or 8, my father bought a little cabin in a town in Texas called Livingston, in an area of Livingston called Onalaska. I specify because of the second part of the story. Anyone with kids needs to be wary of the area. The cabin was really nothing remarkable at only 600 square feet. It was really just one giant room, a teeny kitchen the size of a normal bathroom, and a bathroom the size of a large closet, and a porch out front. The whole property consisted of 2 lots, so there was plenty of space, but the cabin itself was dinky. This whole area was in a strange mix between backwoods and suburbia. It was a true neighborhood, but not the prim and neatly kept neighborhoods I was used to in suburbia Houston. Despite this, it became a very fond place for me, and some of my greatest memories in life are at that cabin, including my evacuation story from Houston during Hurricane Rita, but that is a story for another day. When I was around 11 to 12 years old, my father bought me a 4-wheeler, and the little lake town suddenly became a lot bigger. I didn't go super far, but I definitely ended up going further than I ever had gone before, and it was quite common to see me zipping up and down the roads with a pile of neighborhood kids on the back of the 4-wheeler when we would go up to the lake house on weekend visits. This was around 2001 to 2002, so cell phones were a thing, but it was still common for people to not have them. Usually I had a beeper that I carried around, but with no phones at the lake house, my father gave me a walkie-talkie with a very long reach instead. Looking back on it, now from a world of cell phones, this seems like a bad idea, but this was a small town and we had spent so much time here that it felt safe. So on one of these weekends, I was buzzing around my neighborhood like I usually did, and I stopped at this peninsula that overlooked the lake. This was a set of docks that us kids always came to when we wanted to swim, despite the very real threat of giant alligators. But being stupid kids, we really didn't worry about that. And I was overlooking the lake when my walkie-talkie buzzed to life. Naturally thinking it was my parents trying to reach me, I answered quickly. I couldn't quite make out what they said at first, so tried confirming that it was my dad. This point in the neighborhood was a little ways away from the cabin, but I had reached my parents from this point before, so despite the fact I could not quite recognize the voice, I assumed it was my dad. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but it was off enough that I remember being slightly annoyed. Garbled questions that I answered, but no answers that would have hinted who I was or where I was. Eventually, the conversation started to drift in a way that I knew something was off, but I was not alarmed just yet, as my dad was notorious for pulling pranks on me and goofing around. I kept talking, stupidly. Alarm bells weren't going off yet. Finally, though, the guy on the other end of the walkie-talkie made a comment. I cannot for the life of me remember what he said exactly, but it was enough to make me doubt that it was my father. This is when things took an extremely creepy turn. Bear in mind, I had been talking to this guy pretending to be my father for a good 15 minutes, sitting on my 4-wheeler on this peninsula. "I can see you. You should come take a ride in my boat," he said. My father had a boat, but this was so out of character that it made me realize it wasn't my father. "Dad? You're not Dad, are you?" "What are you talking about?" he said. "If you can see me," I started, feeling a bit peeved that this guy had been messing with me. "What am I wearing?" He paused for a second, before the walkie crackled to life, and he said very clearly, "You're wearing an orange shirt. You have red hair, and you're sitting on a red 4-wheeler right by the swim docks." Why don't you come ride in my boat?" At this point, my eyes widened and my blood ran cold. This entire time, some strange guy that I don't know had been watching me, from God knows where. It took me maybe 10 seconds to look around wildly and then kick the four-wheeler up and race out of there so fast that the wheels had a hard time catching the ground. I remember the wheels spun out against the gravel beneath them, and when the four-wheeler finally started moving, little me had a hard time holding on. I floored it the entire way home, stopped in the middle of the yard, and burst into the house. Obviously, the first thing I did was ask my parents if they had contacted me, which they had not, and hadn't for hours. I was in such a panic that there was no way my dad wouldn't have confessed had it been him. He was a practical joker, but he knew when the fun was over. I hate to think what might have happened had I continued sticking around in the area, or if I hadn't figured out that it wasn't my dad pulling my leg. Nothing came of this incident, though, and my childhood up there resumed as normal. Eventually, the weekend visits stopped, but the story doesn't end there. During my parents' divorce, I moved to live at the lake house permanently with my father, or at least until we could find something better. This was the only place we could go when he left my mother, which is a long story in and of itself, but I won't get into that. My father had recently suffered from health issues, so I took a job at a nearby gas station/tobacco barn to pay the bills and let him recuperate. Thankfully, the lake house had no bills save for electricity, water, and internet, so my small salary was enough to keep us going. I only worked there for 3 months, but those 3 months were by far the creepiest I've ever experienced. Within the first month, a rather tall and obese man became infatuated with me, and he couldn't have been creepier. He had short crew-cut hair and slightly unkempt beard and mustache combo. The first time we ran into each other, he stared at me with these wide, crazy eyes, ordered his gas, and just stood there for 2 to 3 solid minutes, just staring. When I asked if I could help him, he said nothing. Now, the part of the tobacco barn I worked in was strictly the gas side, and I was pretty much in a glass box with an opening to take people's money and give them their cigarettes, which I could not have been more thankful for. Several times that this man came to visit, he would leave to pump his gas after staring at me awkwardly. About the 4th or 5th time, after I thought he had left, I hear a knock on the other side of the barn on the glass. There he was, face pressed against the glass, staring at me with this wide, manic grin and waving at me with just his fingers. It was enough to send me running for my manager when he left, demanding to go on break before I peed myself. The last time I saw him, I will never forget though. It has been etched into my mind so deeply that I doubt bleach would scrub it away. He arrives as he usually did, and orders his gas. This time, however, he reached through the hole in the glass and grabbed my hand before I could put the cash away in the cash register. It wasn't a violent grab, but it was firm enough to keep me from pulling away, being a very sheltered 18-year-old. I froze in place. "I love you," he said, refusing to let go of my hand. I simply stared at him, unnerved at alarm bells ringing in my head. "Say it." What? I responded. "Say you love me." Naturally, I just wanted this guy to go away, and being so freaking scared out of my mind at this point of him, I stammered and said it out of impulse. Maybe he would let me go and go away. "I love you?" I said, uneasily. "Call me if you need anything." "What's my number?" he asked again. This threw me off completely, and the look on my face probably gave away my confusion, because he repeated himself, despite my stammering that I did not know. Finally, he said something that made my blood run cold. I felt like I was going to throw up. "It's 911. He winked. This guy was the sheriff deputy, the person I'd have to call if I got into any sort of trouble in town, the person I'd have to call if I had a medical emergency, or if someone tried to rob me. And he wouldn't let go of my hand. I just nodded, trying to keep myself from shaking bad enough for him to feel it. He had never pulled up in a police car or anything, but when I talked to my manager, she confirmed what he said as being true. Once he did let go of me and went on his way, I retreated to the back and demanded to be relieved from the gas station area. I didn't care. I just did not want to see that guy ever again. Thankfully, we moved soon after, so I never had to. But I will never forget the leering grin that man gave me every single time he purchased gasoline. You'd think moving away would be the end of this story, but no, it got even worse when I went to college. And you wouldn't think that would be the case, considering I was in Galveston. I had needed to go to my counselor to discuss a few things, and this usually involved about 30 minutes of chit-chat, as my counselor and I had become close while I was attending school. During one of these chats, which my father had attended due to him attending school and the same classes I was in an effort to finally get his degree, I mentioned Onalaska, Texas, and how he had owned a lake house up there. Instantly, the happy expression left my counselor's face. She informed me that she had been a social worker in that area for quite a few years, and suddenly, my childhood playground took an extremely dark turn, and that the sheriff at the gas station became a nightmare. Apparently, the area was notorious for pedophilia, kidnappings, and other horrible, horrible incidents. Whole neighborhoods, including police officers, were in on it, and it was common for people trying to out the incidents to either go missing or be completely thrown out of the community through intimidation tactics. She proceeded to tell me of several cases she had worked on, careful to leave out confidential details, of course, including incidents of entire families being in on the whole mess. When I told her about the sheriff I had encountered, she kind of went pale and wouldn't tell me anymore, except that she wasn't surprised. The conversation went on for over an hour and a half, but it was enough to make me never want to return to the small town I had called my childhood summer home, and vowed to never, ever bring any children I might have in the future there. So, to the guy who intercepted my walkie-talkie signal and tried to lure me to his boat, and to the creepy sheriff, let's never meet again. The hotel I worked at was small, only 53 rooms in the entire place. It's located next to downtown in a town in central Minnesota. As a night audit, you work by yourself with the shift being from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. You don't get many people checking into the hotel at night, 1 to 3 at the most. The first duty as the night audit was to lock the doors so only guests could get in with their key. There is also a phone on the wall next to the main entrance, in case someone arrives after the doors are locked, or if somebody orders a pizza, or anything of that sort. There's a front door in the lobby, a back door in the lobby, and 2 side doors. I proceeded to lock all of the doors and head into the back room behind the front desk to do laundry. As there is no staff on hand to do laundry, another task for the night audit is to finish any remaining laundry that wasn't finished during the day. There's a cordless phone you can bring with you when going into the back or around the other parts of the hotel. We had no more scheduled check-ins that night, but there was a couple of rooms available. I heard somebody try and open the front door, was unsuccessful, and left. Moments later, the phone rang, and when I answered, the other person did not talk right away. I walked up to the front desk, and the other person finally started talking. They went on a spiel saying they were a former cop or something about, and forgive me, this part is a bit fuzzy and I semi-blacked out due to fear, having court in the morning, and that if they weren't let in, they were going to come in and shoot me, and that they were circling the hotel. There are windows that look out to the front of the hotel that is visible from the computer I had walked to during the phone call. I told them I was sorry. We didn't have any rooms available, and they hung up before I even finished my sentence. I looked out the window, and there was a person standing across the street, staring back at me with a phone in their hand. At this point, I'm really freaking out, and I go to all the doors to double check that they were all locked. It was a good thing I checked, because one of the side doors had been propped open with a doorstop. Obviously, I shut the door and proceeded to go to a conference room with sight of where the person was standing. I kept the lights off and peeked through the blinds, but the person was gone. I was pretty freaked out the rest of the night, because there are windows pretty much everywhere in this hotel. So if this person was watching me, they would be able to all night, if they pleased. So, person who threatened to shoot me while I was working, let's not meet.